Um, Welcome. My name is Joy Rosenthal. We're here with One Breath Rising, and we're thrilled to have Glenis Redmond today. I'll let EJ introduce her in a second. I just have a few quick notes. One is when Glenis starts reading, it'd be great if everybody could put themselves on mute. Two is remember to use the speaker view so that you can see her better. And she's going to be sharing the screen also. And then I just want to make a quick note of our funders, Brooklyn Arts Council, Poets and Writers, Park Slope Civic Council, 440 Gallery, the Garner Glazer Foundation, and individual donors and our audience. So I will be putting a note, I'll be putting a couple of things in the chat. I'll link to the book that Glennis will be reading from, and also a link to how you can donate to One Breath Rising so we can present more events like this. So thank you everybody for coming and making time on this cold and snowy day, at least in the Northeast. And we're thrilled that you're here. So I'll introduce EJ Antonio, who's another board member, and welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to this presentation by Glenis Redmond. We are so blessed and appreciative that she agreed to come back again this year to read some more from her work that she collaborated on. It's a book called Dave the Potter, about Dave the Potter. And she's going to do some more readings from there and give us a little more explanation on how this book actually came together. But before she starts, I want to read her bio because it's like Glenis was read for us last year, and she became the first Poet Laureate of Greenville, South Carolina in 2023. And since then, every time I look on Facebook, she has gotten another accolade, another award. She got a new book coming out. And I want to say, you work it, girl, work it. Glenis Redmond is the first Poet Laureate of Greenville, South Carolina. She is a 2023 Poet Laureate Fellow selected by the American Academy of Poets. Glenis has published 6 books of poetry. Her latest books are The Listening Skin, 4-way books, and Praise Song for Dave the Potter, art by Jonathan Green, and poetry by Glenis Redmond, University of Georgia Press. Glenis also received the highest arts award in South Carolina, the Governor's Award, and was inducted into the South Carolina Academy of Authors in 2022. The Listening Skin was shortlisted for the Open Pen America and Julie Salk Awards. Glenis has performed nationally and internationally from Hawaii to Haiti. She has toured in England, London, Liverpool, and Luton. She speaks for the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. She has presented in Muscat, Oman in 2016, and for students in Guatemala and El Salvador virtually for Juneteenth 2023. Glenis is a mother of twin daughters, Amber and Celeste. She is a grandmother, Gaga, to Julian, Paisley, and Quinn. Glenis believes poetry is the mouth that speaks when all other mouths are silent. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenis Redmond.
Thank you so much, EJ Antonio. I am so happy to return, and Joy Rosenthal, thank you for putting this together and inviting me back. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I have new headphones. I just wanted to make sure. And I'm going to share my screen. I'm excited about this book. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to read for about 30 minutes and then we'll do a Q&A. So if you guys have questions, so I'll spend the first 5 to 7 minutes talking a little bit about how I came to this project. Let me get into and share my screen. Let's see, here we go. Can everybody see it? And I'm going to play from start. So this is the book, and I can't take credit for it. It's called Praise Songs for Dave the Potter, Art and Poetry for David Drake, with artwork by Jonathan Green and poetry by Glenis Redmond. So I can't take full credit for it because it's a true collaboration. And if you look down at the bottom, the editor of the book is Gabriel Foreman, and then Kwame Dawes wrote the foreword, and afterword is by Evie Shockley. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how this book came into being. So David Drake was an enslaved potter poet from Edgefield, South Carolina. I live in Greenville, South Carolina. Edgefield is about 60 minutes south. There are no photographs of David Drake, so I wanted to show you his pots. His pots is the only thing we have really that represents him. And he was a potter poet. We're not really sure how he learned to become a poet and write, but we do know this: his owner owned a printing press. And David Drake, we surmise that he learned to write, cleaning the printing press. And then he went from being writing to writing poetry, and he wrote primarily in couplets, and he wrote on his pots. So you can see, and the reason I want to show his pots is they don't, they're quite, to me, they're quite beautiful. Some call them very rugged or earthy, but I consider them very beautiful. And if you get close to these pots, you can actually see his fingerprints on his pots. And David Drake, largest collection, or the Greenville County Art Museum has the largest collection of David pots in the country. So if you ever happen to my hometown, come by. It's still traveling now. The exhibit is still traveling. It was in New York. It went to Boston. It went to Atlanta. So I'm not sure where it is now, but I wanted you to see the pot up close, or his pots up close. This is Edgefield in the 1800s, just to get an idea. And then here are my collaborators. And on the left is Lynette Overby, Dr. Lynette Overby from, I think somebody has their, it's not muted. Just want to make sure everybody's on mute. Dr. Lynette Overby, she was the artistic director of our group. And she is the one, we didn't start off doing Dave the Potter. We actually started off doing Harriet Tubman, Harriet Jacobs, and Harriet E. Wilson. And then we slid into Dave because Dave was from South Carolina. And then you see me in the orange pants. Jonathan Green is the visual artist from Greenville, South Carolina. If you've ever been to Charleston, you're familiar with this work. He's a Gullah Geechee landscape portraiture artist. And so his work, I call him, he is Mr. South Carolina. He started doing David Drake's paintings of him in the 90s when none of us were really familiar with David Drake. And then next to him is Dr. Gabrielle Foreman, and she's the editor of the book. And then on the very end is one of my twin daughters, Celeste, who happened to be with me on the trip to South Carolina. And before I get into the Dave work, I wanted to tell a little bit of my origin story. And those of you who know me already know this story, but might not know how this came about. So Jonathan Green, the visual artist, and who dubbed David Drake Sir Dave and started painting him in the 90s, I met Jonathan Green in the 90s, and I was still a counselor. And Jonathan Green was, he is from the Low Country, very connected to his roots. And he came to Greenville, and I met him. Now, Jonathan Green is born with a caul, C-A-U-L, on his face. And in the Gullah Geechee culture, that means you have the gift of sight. So he looked at me and he said, "Why are you still counseling? You're a poet." And he had no idea that I was already in my own mind thinking about where I was having my own existential crisis, and was thinking heavily about poetry. And it wasn't until he asked me to write a poem about home for his calendar, and it had to be 21 lines. And I wrote this horrible poem about home. and and it wasn't accepted. But right after that, I was at my mother's house and I found this photo. And this is my mother and I in 1968. And this is when I really started to understand who I was as a poet. So without Jonathan Green, I don't think I would have started to make my connection to home, and home being about people and also being about place. I was an Air Force brat, so I wasn't really, I didn't feel really based in South Carolina, although my family was from there and I was born there. This is our home that you see behind. I wish that car still existed because I love it. And I'm just going to share the poem that I wrote that's to this poem, and then I'm going to get into the day book. But this poem I wrote for my mother. Can you guys see how closely I'm connected to my mother? I mean, that look is a look of bliss right there. Like my mother is still living. She's 87 years old. And this is when I really gained my voice. It's called Mama's Magic. My mama is magic. Always was, always will be. There is one phrase that constantly bubbled from the lips of her 5 children. We thought my mama knew everything. Believed she did as if she were born full blown from the Encyclopedia Britannica. I could tell you stories how she transformed a rundown paint-filled shack into a home. How she heated us with 10-tub baths from a kettle on the stove, put her over in there like an elixir. My mama is protection like those quilts her mama used to make. She tucked us in what cut out history all around us, and we found we could walk anywhere in this world and not feel alone. My mama never whispered the shame of poverty in our ears. She taught us to dance to our own shadows. Pay no attention to those grand parties on the other side of the tracks. Make your own music, she say, as she walked and cleaned the sagging boards of that place. You'll get there. You'll get there, her broom seemed to say with every wisp. We're my mama's favorite recipe. She whipped us up with her big brown hands and a big brown bowl supported by her big brown arms. We were homemade children, stitched together with homemade love. We didn't get everything we ever wanted, but we lacked for nothing. We looked at the stars of my mama's eyes and they told us we owned the world. We walked like kings and queens, even on midnight trips to the outhouse. We were under her spell. My mama didn't study at no Harvard or Yale, but the things she knew, you couldn't learn in no book, like how to make your life sing like sweet potato pie sweetness out of open window, how to make anybody feel at home, how at just the right moment be silent and with those eyes say, everything's gonna be all right, child. Everything's gonna be all right. How she tended to our sickness, how she raised our spirits, how she kept flowers living on our dilapidated porch in the midst of family chaos. My mama raised children like it was her business in life. Put us on her hip and kept on moving, keeping that house pine sol clean. Yeah, my mama is magic, always was, always will be. Her magic, how to stay steady and sure in this fast-paced world. Now when people see me with my head held high and my back wrecked and look at me with that, who does she think she is? I keep on walking with assurance inside. I'm Black Magic, and I'm Jeanette Redmond's child. And so the other reason why I'm doing that poem is that this book is full of essays. So there's an academic approach, intellectual approach, and there's also interview with Jonathan Green as well. And all of his David Drake's verses are in this book too. But I tell my story of how I came to meet Jonathan Green and how then after I met him, you know, here it is 30 years later that we collaborate on this book, and he had already done the day work. So it's all these circles coming to one. So here is one of the first pieces that you'll find. This piece is called Edgefield, and I love it. And it's really a hard look because when I drive past cotton, you know, love is not the first thing that comes to mind. I always feel this visceral feeling about cotton. But Jonathan also talks about how beautiful cotton is. And it is beautiful, but the story is weighted. And a lot of the work that I wrote, I wrote firsthand from my mother and my grandmother. My mother picked 250 pounds of cotton a day, and my grandmother 350 pounds of cotton a day. So this is not it does involve the intellect, but a lot of this comes from my personal history. And so when you hear these poems in the colloquial language, it's not something I made up. It's something that was passed down my family line. So here's the poem, Feel Cotton, to Jonathan Green's piece, Edgefield. We stand not on the edge, but in the middle of the field, in between this white blaze that God made. Our minds not fixed on the North Star, but grounded to the weight in our bones as we pick, prick, and bleed, dragged from what seems like Genesis to Revelation. We are bred and wed to this cotton spear hold. We sing hymns like Still Away, but we know these songs be the only thing we'll ever know of wings. How can something so comely turn so ugly? When greed wraps his hand around the land, cotton becomes a field of lies, acting like the truth. The cotton crop got too many mouths, works us from can't see to can't see, with 2 cotton sacks strapped across our backs. We forget how we once dreamed to be turned up like sunflowers in praise, or how we once prayed to be woven to a greater whole, linked by the right hand of fellowship, singing, how do you do, sir? How do you do, sir? We know nothing about freedom in this heat. We got a blind eye and a deaf ear to everything, except what's at hand. Cotton, running in straight rows, the only train we was ever meant to ride. Here is a painting that we kind of go back into Dave's young life. And I love this depiction by Jonathan Green because a lot of times when we, in history, enslaved people are flattened. You know, we hear a lot about the chains and the brutality, but we don't see the love, you know, the origin stories. And I love this piece. And I do recommend these pictures don't do it justice. The book really does. So I'm going to read 2 poems in persona about Dave's life. The first one is called What I Knows. What I knows, I don't know much, but I know that my mama's hands be rough, but be tenderest brown. I know her arms be the first world I ever knew. Her love be like butter churn, a doing thing. Be like feeding guineas and Carolina Reds, constant. Eyes from slave cabins and shackles, but feel free when I'm held by her. They say as I's country born, but I specs mama ain't. She full of the old ways. No roots and herbs soothe and ache and make a fever break. So I got a lot of Africa flowing in me. She making ways where there ain't none. Where you think I get fire to make pots. They calls me Dave, but I believe my mama called me by another name. Sounds like freedom. Sound like run, There are many ways to be free. I reads when the law say don't. I write when the law say don't. I'm from a whole mess of don'ts, but I do anyways. Like my pots, I stand firm. Pots that hold my destiny. They and me, like I and them. No matter which way I turn, I hold on to the Almighty's unchanging hand. I always find my center. What I don't know. I'm from what I knows and most of what I don't. What I knows about my beginning is like an empty field before seed. No crop, no good and plenty. I was on the lookout for how I came to be. But I mostly have nothing at hand, except what the Lord done shown. I knows I'm my daddy's seed, but who ain't? Question is, which crop? I look at my hands and I wonder whose hands match these. There's so much not to know. I do know I'm from work every which way that word turn, like spade and trowel, like my people who sweat and sing as they pick and pull. I was from the greed of the corn, both sides of that thing evil. Ain't nothing good in slavery, no good in it, no good of it. Ain't nothing a master can do for me but free me. I had 5 of them. That's what about that. They calls me Dave. My pots bear my name, signed by my own hand. That act can get me treed, but riding be like running in my mind. When people needs a word or two, I turn words like I turn pots. From Edgefield where they cut a nigga just as soon as look at one. But I figures a way to dance on that blade. I write not fully a slave, not fully free neither. This edge be where I live. And I'm just gonna keep on reading. This next one is one of the most, I think, festive paintings of the book, and it's called Dave's Market. Jonathan Green's work is very festive, and I'm going to read 2 poems. I'm going to read I Master and Market here. And I always tell people, and please write down questions as you have them. Please write down questions. You know, who do you think? There's a lot of talk around who is Dave in this picture, and I didn't do it justice because there's another guy sitting right up. You see the 2 horses? There's another man sitting up there, okay? And then there's one down there, and then to the left. So who do you think Dave is? And so we'll talk about it after. This one is called I Master. Who drives the whip, be at the helm? Work harder, boy, don't nobody have to tell me. Back into this clay, I shoulder the grind. See my pots and you know I was yoked not by lash, but by every chamber of my heart. What my mouth don't say, my hands do. My pots be what most people ain't. Ho, heads down, I lifted higher than the one trying his best to beat me down. Into each mound I pulls a body into being. With these hands of fire burns that can't be doused. Sometimes I get puffed up, wild turkey-like. I do my best to smooth my feathers down, bend myself around prayer. But here I stand, closest to the Lord, my one true master. He turns the world. I spin this wheel. I breathe life into these lumps. I too, from mud, make miracles. and market. I pulls people like I pulls pots. From miles around they come. They see what I got on spin. Pots and plenty of talk. I know what they be saying. I got the gift of gab. I open hearts, wallets, and purses. I do what I do, and I does it well. Plenty of sun in my words to keep smile on all the faces. They say I's potter, but my work got many layers for the Lord. They say all that glitter ain't gold. Knows I glitter and I's golden. I write, give me silver or either gold, though they are dangerous to our soul. I's not lost. I potter, poet, and preacher. Shout if you don't listen at the Bible, you'll be lost. They comes to buy what I got, but it can't be bought or sold. Gots to be believed. Can I get a witness? Can I get an amen? Step up, step right up, ladies and gentlemen. Look at all the pots and this potter. See what the Lord done turned. I believe that, and this is, I haven't heard anybody else say this, but I believe that David Drake was our first performance poet, one of our first performance poets, because he really had to go to the market and sell his wares. And he was not only just selling the pots, he was selling himself, and from what I read in the research, he had a lot of humor, a lot of wit, and a lot of presence. I'm going to read 2 poems here. This is one of my favorite paintings of the Serve Day collection by Jonathan Green. I advocated for this to be the front of the book because I just think it's revolutionary that we see this enslaved person reading. And that's what's so iconic about, David Drake, is that he was able to read and write. And when I see, I get emotional. I get emotional seeing this. This might be my favorite. I love them all, but this might be my favorite painting of the set. And I get emotional when I see the pots too. I do. At the first time, I had written about them way before I saw them, and I was writing about the Harriets, but a few people in town knew that I was working on Dave, and a friend at the museum asked me to come over to do something else, and she said, "Oh, while you're here, I want you to see this pot." And I walked in, and it was Dave's iconic pot with this iconic couplet, and he has over 27 couplets, but his iconic couplet is, "I wonder where is all my relations, friendship to all in every nation." And when I saw that couplet, I just burst out into tears. So here I'm writing to his reading and his writing to Jonathan Green's work. Read. To sit tall in these words, I travel more than miles. From chains to potter to poet, nobody knows all my doings. I quiet when I piece them together as a quick field study. Sees it once, I got it. When nobody lurking over my shoulder, A, B, C, be like clay on a wheel. I make letter into words. I turn them till they come round. I know everything's a living thing, and every living thing speaks. If you got an eye and an ear to see and hear it. Field shout, bear or white, barren or wipe. Mountain show, winter or spring. Sky say, rain or sun. I read what the Almighty wrote. I knows it like I knows myself. I knows myself When Genesis preached, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. In my words, be my beginning. Everywhere I look, I see God. In my words, in the world, in me. God ordered my life like lines. First land, next pot, then clay page. Brick making. So he actually, many of the enslaved people had other jobs that they did, and brick making was one of his other things that he did. And actually people have found bricks with his name, so they think that's where he, was practicing, because he didn't write necessarily on paper. What he's holding there is probably his enslaved owner's newsletter, which was called The Hive. But he wrote on the pots, and he wrote on bricks. So this one is called brick making recipe for writing. I mix mortar to make bricks. 1 part water, 2 parts grit, and a whole mess of sweat off my brow. Stir and stir. Turn my mouth just so, make the whole lot set just right. Before they dry, levels them. Then go to school on them. No paper, just wet slate. No pen, stick. Writes D, A, B, E. Ain't easy, but with these letters, I learns to steady my hand. Then I stack them bricks even like, one on top of the other. Know for miles around the houses where white people live, where they lay their heads, they walls bear my name. So this one I don't get to do much, and I don't share. This hasn't been proved. We don't know how, but David Drake lost his leg, and there's a lot of speculation. Said he did it on purpose because the family was moving to New Orleans. He didn't want to move. There is a lot of talk that he was a heavy drinker. Who knows what kind of self-medication an enslaved person was doing, So I'm just going and letting the mystical hand take over. And this is the poem I wrote. It's called How I Walk. This leg gone. Feel the same way it always do. No matter how I walk, something inside missing. This one leg gone, feel like I always not having a say when I gets to come and go. About my kin being bought and sold. What of my one leg? I've got a pain I can't tote, a toothache in my heart. I know I be the potter that fires the bottle, but I also be the bottle that can't hold its fire. I bought her pots for a little taste of the moon. In my mind, that be an even trade. But I be out of my mind sometimes, and that's exactly where's I aiming to go. In this light, I tell myself life ain't that bad. But flapping mouth spink other contrary, says I drinks too much. They might be right. I drinks a little. There's 2 kinds of moonshine, skied and bottled. I love how they both burn. Short poem, it's called Irony. A one-legged man who writes in twos. And let's see, I'm gonna if we have enough time, I'm gonna just read like 2 more poems. I'm gonna read let's see, this one, because this is From Earth We Came by Jonathan. And you know, I interpreted this as a love loss. I interpret this as going to a grave site. And so there was a love story that was burning in me. And what I loved about this project is that Dr. Overby had her students, her dance students, they would be dancing, Dave. They would bring this to life while I'm reading these poems. I would record myself reading, send them to Delaware, and they would dance. And then eventually they came down to Greenville and danced. And it elevated, it amplified the whole experience. And there was this one moment, it was an older dancer, because she works with non-traditional students as well. And so a woman by the name of Gabrielle as well. And she was, I want to say she was maybe late 30s or early 40s. And she was behind me dancing this poem you're getting ready to hear. And it's the thing that happens when only poets read, where I feel like, you know, you get hot, the moment gets hot, and I call it the ancestors showing up. And I couldn't see her dancing behind me, but I could literally feel her dancing behind me. And even though it was filmed, the film got lost. And I just hate that, because it was just one of those moments, and we could never do it like that ever again. It's just the right timing. So this poem is called Grave. Even in death, we can't escape. You in this ragged patch, passed off as a so-called grave. Me a still away at night, 'cause I ain't daylight free. Gots to come when the land don't call. Between washing clothes and wringing chicken necks. Sunday be that day, no plow touch the ground. I get here then, but Lord knows your memory calls on me every day. Reminds me how I know myself from my name coming out your mouth. Freedom and home in one breath. I was a well-held cup in your hands. I won't feel that hole again. When your fingers danced on my skin, I grieves you all the time. But I don't let a drop of this river spill from my eye. I tamp down what wells. I 21 nails and pine box myself shut. I come to this place where you buried to mark my misery. No tombstone, no name etched, just me. From the earth we came, and to it we shall return, Bible says. I guess it'd be a blessing for you. I praise you at rest on the other side of Jordan, but I can't sing hallelujah anyhow. This be the heaviest work I ever done. Carrying on, carrying you, living inside my chest. Excuse me, sometimes the grief wells up, and it can be my own personal grief, you know, and then also the collective grief, and present grief and past grief, where they connect. And you know, I think about someone I had taken a paint workshop, and they were talking about abstract work, and the artist was saying that even in abstract work, the artist still interjects themselves in one line. You can feel the artist. And even though I try to remove myself, I'm in all of these poems. I'm in all of these persona poems. My ancestors are in these poems, and it's something that I'm not dispassionate about, as you can see. So I'm gonna read one last one, and then we can, if you guys got questions, and then I can close with the poem, if that's okay. Let me see if I can get back on get back on track. Sometimes I wonder, as poets and writers and artists, why do we do this to ourselves? And I think we have no other choice. I mean, we're compelled. And as a young child, I was always that odd person in my family, and my mother would call me an old soul, and she would say, sometimes when I look at her, she would say, "Stop looking at me. You look at me like you're looking at, into my soul." And it was that, I think it's called, what artists do, those that stare into other worlds. We are not just ourselves. We are many selves. And I applaud artists, because it is hard to be in the moment and be there and here too. So this poem, before we open it up for questions, is a poem where you really do hear my voice. And if you see this painting, I love this one. If you can see the vessels, and you can see Jonathan Green treats the vessels in the way, his lens. He's a very colorful artist, But if you see David Drake's vessels, they are earthen brown or red clay, or sometimes they're beige, sometimes they have a greenish hue. But he treats, so this book, you get 3 South Carolinians in this book. You have Dave, who's our ancestor, 1800s. Then you have Jonathan Green, Gullah Geechee, landscape portraiture artist, full of color, gay man who has a lot of dignity and rootedness, who I held on to, because here I am, this South Carolinian who comes in, maybe I'm 13 when we moved back to South Carolina, and I'm trying to find my footing. And my footing of being the only sibling, a child of my parents born in South Carolina. And once I really fully understood South Carolina is who I am, is a big part of who I am, and just as much as me being a Air Force raised. But here you'll get this poem I'm going to do. It's called Notes in the Margin. But if you see the birds, I just always see those as like Sankofa, the going back, returning to the past. And so in my work, I feel like I just keep returning to that which I don't know, that which sometimes I will never know, and that which I feel like I get into dreams. So this poem is called Notes in the Margin, an ancestral ars poetica. To find our Black history, search libraries and courthouses. There, relegated to slave records, to property ledgers, note just below animals, mules, horses, and cows, beneath objects, farm equipment and household goods. Witness, even in this tight space, how we are not fastened to the page. Understand our ancestors' feet did the talking. We're lost in these vast erased spaces. Listen, hear silenced voices and lives. Consult the field. Hear it say, I got more rest than they did. Blood cries out, so listen to the lynching tree. Ask, why does it lean? Let the whipping post tell it. It speaks in tongues of slash and deep gash. Smell the wounds turn to pus. Don't turn your head. See Black backs calligraphied with grief and anger. Measure the distance between cabin and big house, but feel the canyon in between. See daytime and nighttime through cabin slats. Know cold and heat intimately. Hear bellies growl. See chains or no chains, but kept anyhow. What of their names? You get a price, numbers, prophet. You might get a cook, a seamstress, a blacksmith, or a field hand. With a little luck and a little grace, you are blessed to find a relic to press your dream memory upon. Conjure like a griot. Stir the pot. Keep it hot. Say enslave, not slave. What was done unto us. Shackle and change. African proverb, until the lion writes, every story will glorify the hunter. Grow teeth and claw. Pray with pen. Write in this vein, in this terror, in this glory. So I will stop there and stop sharing my screen. And we can open it up if that's okay.
Wonderful, Glenis. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Really bring the poems to life, you know, off the page. I mean, they have a life of their own on the page, but when you add your voice to them, it's really an ancestral song.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
I thank you for the song, because I think, you know, I didn't title it. I know praise is a form of poetry. Praise poetry is what I've done most of my writing life, but there is something to singing in these poems. There's something that lends itself to a musicality, and if I can hear them, then that's they come in song.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you all for listening.
And you asked us a question on the market painting.
Yes.
Which man was Dave the Potter?
Yeah.
Okay.
What did you all think?
I think he's the man in the forefront that's carrying the sack.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Is that him?
She's like, is it? And so for the longest time, I didn't talk to Jonathan Green about this, even though we talked and whatever. I didn't ask him, what he meant by these paintings. But if you have the book in front of you, if you have the book, let me see what page that's on. Market is on 64.
63 is the picture.
63, yeah, the picture. And so there is a picture of, I always, for some reason, I don't know why, I thought he was the man in the back on the horse. I mean, I just like the way that man on the back had this sense of presence, even though he didn't have a pot in his hand. And then, so the consensus is, EJ, Antonia, that you're right. It's the man in the front with the pot.
Okay, but do you want to know why I think that?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
If you look at all of the other hats, they all have a sense of fabric. They sort of droop, the brim sort of droop down. Yes. But on that particular gentleman, the hat brim is straight, and it's almost like it's a solid material. And when I was in high school, I went to the High School of Music and Art here in New York City, and we were as an art major. And so every semester we did a different discipline in the arts. And I've actually thrown pots. And if you look at the brim of his hat, that's what it looks like.
It looks like
the clay is on the wheel.
I like that. And no one's ever brought that out before, but I definitely love that. I love that. And you see so many things when you look in these paintings. Beautiful. There's a couple of people. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Glenis.
Yes.
You know you're marvelous.
Hi, Pat.
Hey, my love. Hi, you know you're everything. This is just a real treat, and I'm so glad we have so many people joining. But he also, that hat resembles the hat of the man that was reading.
Oh, okay. See how beautiful these paintings are? The stories. Oh yeah, it does.
Mhm.
I never thought about that. The one where he's reading. Very similar. Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
Y'all, Pat was my first boss when I was a counselor. So this is how far back we go.
Oh,
And when I left,
she's never had a boss. She is the boss.
no, you didn't. She was the boss. She was the boss.
I love you.
But she did also, she was prophetic. She told me I was returning back to Greenville when I moved to Asheville. I said, oh, what's she talking about? I ain't come back to Greenville. Yeah, 20-something years later, she was right. I did come back. But I have a couple people with their hands raised. EJ Antonio, I don't know if you want to call them. Looks like Antonia and Crystal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Antonia, go right ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
Please forgive me if I don't remember, if I don't recall everything that is going on, because I've been through a lot of family, fixer-ups,
Yeah.
Everybody delegates somebody who will fix them at Amen. So I've been like trying to do healthcare. And I figured this day will be for me.
Good.
This day is going to be about art. Glenis, you are a reincarnation of my titi. My titi means in Spanish, my auntie. This visceral strength that you have is blowing me up. Because I write poetry too. But you have, just you know what you do to me. I'm African Puerto Rican, and I have been trying to strain. I go way back. I've been trying to strain from the last living auntie that I had. That's going to tell me something about African Puerto Ricans, right? And she was telling me about the United Fruit Company killing them, burying them, all that stuff, and everything that was done to my folks.
Yes.
And then my uncle, he worked in the fields, but he was a healer. He tried to, every fourth person in Puerto Rico that was poor had tapeworms. And he healed them. He found a way how to heal them. All right. And then there was a place where there was leprosy. Nobody tells you that in Puerto Rico there was leprosy. Okay. And my auntie told me about this. Yeah, girl, there was leprosy in Puerto Rico. Us poor folks found a way, joining with the Taínos and the African people, joining how to heal each other in this slavery.
Yes. Yes.
And here we are, still rising. And mi mamita, you are my titi that is reincarnated. You are my auntie that is reincarnated, Glenis. You're my auntie reincarnated. I'm telling you that. You don't know that, but I know that. You are my auntie. And I can't stop crying about that.
Thank you, sis.
All I'm saying is that please let us continue. There is no, religion, God. There is only decency. Let us keep on being decent to each other. That's the strength. That is what Glenis is saying with her visceral poetry. It ain't just poetry. It's what was going on. It's what you should feel for yourself. And if you feel it for yourself, you know somebody else is feeling it.
Sis, let me tell you something. You a healer too, because those words coming out, they are healing. Thank you. This work, and we all have a different process, right? And it's so interesting that he worked with vessels. And when I was doing this work, I really felt like that's what I was being, a vessel, and letting. I remember I was writing these poems, and I was somewhere like Montana, and I knew I had to write these poems. And all of a sudden, I'm on the plane, and Dave just decided, here I am. You know how embarrassing to be on a plane and you crying and trying to write on a plane, the person next to you looking like, what's going on over there? You know, I'm trying to write. And then so I was living in Charlotte at the time, and I get home, and I spent 3 days. I was at home by myself 3 days, really not eating much, just sitting on the floor and listening to Dave. And I hear you. I hear you. I think when you're open vessels, those stories come through. And if you think about the indigenous people and our ancestors, they all had a similar healing aspect. Like in these poems too is my grandmother and my great grandmother. You know, I've got them around me. I literally have painted rocks with their dates. You know, this is Katie, and this is her mother, Rachel, you know, and then her mother, Hannah, you know, and we just go back as far, and Angelina, and it's always the women, you know, who kind of want to show up for me, but the men are there too. And I applaud you, and I thank you for bringing that to forefront. It's not a light thing. Thank you, sis. I see you. I think it was Crystal.
Hi. You know, it's amazing. I've cried a lot this week. I just finished Sophia Sinclair's autobiography.
I haven't read it yet.
I met Nikki Giovanni this week, and she read poetry. And you know, when you talked about your mother and your grandmother, I was raised a city girl in New York, and my daughter went down to Mississippi to work with Teach for America. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I saw cotton fields. And I was compelled to pull, you know, I pulled to the side of the road, and I went into the field, and I tried to pick cotton just to see what it felt like to feel that, you know, what it must have been like if, and when you say how much 350 or what, I mean, to me, that's amazing, because I could barely get 2 or 3 out without getting all prickly. But that was the first comment. You had me at the cotton fields. But in addition to that, you know, when you think of pottery, you know, 1,000 or 1,000,000 years from now, that's what they'll be finding. Dave will still be around because they'll be finding shards of his pottery. And so he will live, he's eternal.
Yes, he is. It is true.
You know, because, you know, they're digging up Seneca Village now and finding those kinds of artifacts in Central Park.
Exactly.
And thirdly,
go ahead.
How did you and Jonathan find each other? Because there's so much simpatico in your words and his drawings, his paintings.
Well, there's a lot there. So first of all, Crystal, here's the thing. Cotton field stopped me. I was 18 when I first saw my first field of cotton, and I was on my way to college, and I had to stop and go, this is what my ancestors did. And I too stopped and picked a piece of cotton. And I knew
pick a bale of cotton.
I just picked one piece, and I was like, and then it threw me back. And then it was in 2008. I was working on my master's, and I went up to North Carolina to Edenton. And that's when I saw cotton as far as the eye could see. Now, that is what really threw me into these ancestral voices we're talking about. I pulled the car over. I spent 3 weeks working out there, and it's about 3 or 4 plantations, cotton fields, just, oh. And all of these voices start coming in, and I started, writing in this way. Started writing in men's voices. So it was kind of, I felt like I was inhabited by the cotton itself, and I believe the cotton itself is populated with people, with spirits. The cotton tufts. I mean, it just really, if you've never seen it like that, it's just a very mystical thing. And as far as Jonathan Green and I saw his, and I hate that I didn't put this, but it's in the book. If you look in my essay, there's a painting called it's in my essay. It's on page 148. The Greenville County Museum of Art brought a piece of his work, and I donated $50, and I thought I was donating a lot of money, which was a lot of money to me then. We had, I think it was like 50 people who went in together, and this was so long ago that I still had my married name is on the thing at the Greenville County Museum of Art. I'm Glenis Redmond. So he came to Greenville when we bought that painting, and then it was there. He looked at me and said, "Why are you still counseling? You're a poet." And I was, Pat will know this, I was struggling with fibromyalgia then, and I was going through my own existential crisis. And I had already knew that I was gonna start writing, but I didn't know how he knew. So it was just, and his work had already spoke to me before I ever met him, because, I had grew up in the era of like watching TV, watching Step and Fetch It, watching people in blackface, seeing all these the paraphernalia, roadside sambos and the jigaboos, and just all of this negative depiction of who we were. And then when I saw Jonathan Green for the first time, I said, that's who we are as a people. We are beautiful. We are resplendent. And it was a celebration. And I had said, I couldn't buy a print back then, but I had his postcards, I had his calendars, I had, all of that. And I still have one of his posters that he signed for me and the girls. And so that's how our relationship began. And then it just, over the years, he would kind of just, his paintings spoke to me way before he ever said a word to me. He got me straight on place and people and who I was. And I was South Carolina. And we are a beautiful people, no matter what we've been through. And I love the fact that he showed us up in color. Because I come from a family like, we gonna dress no matter what we've been through. And I would just look, I'd go down to Charleston, and Charleston just will open up these stories. So my next work is called Port Cities, Portal to Other Worlds. My next full-length poetry will be about port cities all over the United States. New York is one of them. New York speaks very loud to me as well. The African voices, ancestral voices are really strong there. New Jersey as well. Believe it or not, Bristol, England. So it's just these moments. It took me 15 years to figure out what was going on with me, traveling as a poet, that I was having these unearthly, otherworldly moments. And it took me a while to connect the dots that those were all slave ports.
One of my friends painted this painting that's behind me, and it's a portal painting of slaves looking out the door, people who were captured looking out the door to what comes next. And
right.
I just feel like you're channeling this stuff, and thank you.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be seen, because it's sometimes it's very disconcerting when you don't know what's coming through. I mean, now I'm very aware, but early on, imagine I was having these moments, and I was quaked awake, and it started very early. I started when I was very young, but it took me a while to figure out it was poetry, and it was more than just poetry. It's what our dear sister was talking about. It was about healing, and not just for the self, but for the community. But
one last comment is, I have delivered babies with the call, and I try to tell their mothers that is special and what they should, look for. And I don't know whether when it happens, the way that people treat you make you special, or it's special. I just know that it happened because I didn't break the amniotic sac before the delivery.
Well,
And
true.
the baby came out with the sac on it. Sometimes the sac will leak and it won't fully open up, and then the baby will push it through, which, for me is like, okay. But yeah, I try to tell the mothers because my mother taught me that it is special when you're born with the amniotic sac fully still engaged.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the Gullah Geechee, because that's low country, and I was born in the upstate. So we didn't have fully intact, even though some of us stem from the same place. They're more in touch because they stayed together, different groups from where they were from. And so they had a lot of the belief systems that were still intact. So some of it is a direct connection, and some I just honor it, and I know that to be, but it's not necessarily coming from my folks who are from Nigeria and Cameroon. So thank you so much. And I think Monique had a hand raised. Yes.
So I just want to thank you so much for the work, and I'm particularly interested in the combination of artwork and the poetry. But I mentioned in the chat that I'm reading Michael Harriot's Unwhitewashed History, and he is very much centered in South Carolina. And one of the facts that he raises is that 40% of the folks who came, who were imported, I guess, from Africa as enslaved people, came through Charleston, right? So I'm kind of answering. I was asking you the question since your work is also so grounded in your experience in South Carolina. Like, do you think that there is some some specific special ingredient that is there in the soil? Also, I went to school at Bristol University in England, so we have that commonality in terms of port towns, right? And I live in
yes.
So yes.
We
so
can
anyway,
talk.
That question. Yes. That was my.
Well, I will.
It's like what do you feel about this connection?
Yeah, I do think the sheer numbers coming through Charleston in itself makes it a very special, weighted. It's imbued. When I went to Charleston for the first time, I was married. My daughters were maybe, I don't know. I can't remember, but I'm bad with time. But anyway, I thought I was going on, we were going on an anniversary. I thought I was going as a tourist. And it was just like the ancestors smacked me. They just had their way with me. And here we are, I'm on a carriage ride, and everybody else is looking out the carriage and listening to the person. I'm like kind of like in a trance, my eyes rolling in the back of my head. I'm on my period, my blood flow is heavier, and my husband at the time was just used to me. He was like, there goes Glenis. But I mean, it wasn't a spectacle because I was able to contain myself enough. But I knew something unearthly had started happening to me. And I will tell you, Charleston was I call it my oracle. And the reason I call it my oracle is because the ancestors and everyone who came through there spoke, and I heard them. And you just don't go. And I have written essays about this, and so I think all the ports, I think every port has that power. Bristol was very powerful, especially when I did a reading, and a white man came up to me and said, "Well, we didn't have slavery here," and and so there was another white guy behind him and said, "Oh no, we just built the ships, and we just insured the ship, So it was like, and so, but I was not prepared for Bristol. I stayed in a bed and breakfast, very posh bed and breakfast. I did not have a drop to drink, no alcohol, teetotaler, stayed up for 48 hours straight, writing straight in stream of consciousness. So Bristol was very powerful. These ports are powerful. The land speaks.
They're crazy because I went to university there, and there was a Black.
Oh, she went out.
Hold on, wait a minute, Monique. You went on mute again for some reason.
There was. I went to school in Bristol, and there was a Black boys' hill and a white ladies' road. I don't know if they have it there till today, but I had to walk up and down that, going to school. So I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Bristol was interesting, but when I go to England, I say, oh yeah, Charleston is. But I if you're empathetic and you're a very sensitive individual, which I think a lot of artists are, most poets and writers are, you're sensitive to the land, you're sensitive to what's gone on before, the history. It's not just African history, but of course, if it's in my lineage, I think the blood, just remembers it. It just cannot help but respond.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, the blood holding the memory, you had said that you had a dancer who was dancing behind you, and they had filmed it, and then the film was lost.
Right.
And when you said the film was lost, my immediate reaction to that was that, okay, whatever was saying that you were not supposed to actually see it.
Right.
You were never really supposed to capture it visually,
right.
But your body will hold in its cellular memory what that was.
It was one of those beautiful moments where, like I said, I'm in front, she's behind me dancing, but I could feel the waves coming up. So when I read, she would move and I would read like that. It was just like we were moving in tandem. And then when we got finished, it was like, ooh, what was that? And then I did want to see it because I felt it, but I think you're right. I mean, I think it will never, as long as I'm living, it will always be alive. Because I think the fire.
The two of you will have that memory, and whoever was there to actually
in the
see
audience
happening,
crazy.
They will have that cellular memory of that feeling of it.
That's right. That's right. And I think that, when we go to live concerts or we've been to a reading or we've been somewhere, and I don't care if it was like 1978 or 1982, there's a special moment that happened and you all were, so you remember, you're like, oh, remember that. And there doesn't have to be a picture, doesn't have to be a video. There's this kind of group consensus of this was a moment. So,
yes.
And I want to be mindful of time. Yeah.
Yes, we're running a little over. So
yes,
I want to thank everyone that came out this afternoon, and we hope that you enjoyed Glenis's reading from Dave the Potter, and her giving us some little background story on how this book came to be. For those of you who don't have the book, I have the hardcover of it. And it really is the printing, the paper quality. It is definitely photo tabletop, coffee table quality book, and it's really put together beautifully. And I encourage everyone to go, if you don't have a copy, to get a copy for your library, because this is a book that you will pass down. It really is that was done that well. And it is a true sense of the meaning of collaboration in publishing.
Talking about collaboration, we should also mention Redwood Court.
Oh yes, Delana Dameron book, and
it's also in the conversation.
is based in Columbia, South Carolina. I'll be appearing with her down here on March 6th. So that is perfect. Thank you for reminding me. I'll be with my sister on March 6th. I don't know if it will be virtual as well, but I know she was in New York for a couple of readings there. So please get that book as well. Thank you for that reminder. And yes.
Yes, Delana has read For One Breath Rising, and she's I've known her for many years. She's a fabulous poet. And
yes,
so
she
I
is.
highly
And now
recommend
she got a novel.
any of her
It
work.
is seamless the
Any
way
of her
we
work.
communicate. Okay? You
Yes.
know, somebody tell about somebody else, and you know, we are all one about the
We
same
are.
conversation.
It's connected.
Yep.
It's connected.
So anyway, I would like to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon and supporting Glenis and supporting our reading series. And I hope that you'll join us next month. We're going to not be on the second Sunday next month. We're going to be, I think, the last Sunday in the month, but we're going to have a real treat because one of our board members is working with one of our jazz musicians, and they have put together a video chronicling the life and legacies of Terry and Thomas Chapin. And they're going to show the video and discuss how they collaborated together to make it. And so we hope that you'll join us. And that event is going to be Sunday, March 24th, and it will be a Zoom event. So you will be able to just, register for it and then sign, join us. And so again, thank you everyone for coming out. And I'm turning it back over to Joy.
Women artists. Mention the women artists.
Yes, we're going to have a lot of women artists this next coming year, this next season, and that is going to be closing out Women's History Month. So we love to celebrate women all year round, but that one in particular.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. This is what an incredible day, what an incredible reading, and what an incredible subject, and what an incredible poet. So, and everybody, I love all the energy of all the people who've been asking questions and making your comments have been just fantastic. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next month, and keep on keeping on.
Yes.
Thanks for having me, and I've saved the chat so I can read. I'm not good at reading and looking at the chat.
We'll send it to you. Yeah.
Okay, and I just want to thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Glenis.
Thank
Glenis.
you. Thank you.
Glenis, you are my reincarnated auntie. I want you to know that.
I receive it. And EJ Antonio, thank you. Joy, thank you. And all of you who showed up. And it's so good to see Jim and Jenna and all of you, Pat, all of you that came, Allison, Jacqueline. Thank you for this evening. Thanks for spending your Sunday with me.
Thank you, my darling Glenis.
I
love you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Blessings.
Blessing.
Yeah.
Love you.